Hi, I'm Mark Regev.
And I'm Ruthie Bloom.
And you're here for another episode of Israel Undiplomatic.
So please like, subscribe, and send us your comments. Also subscribe to jns.org.
Ruthie, we had a very eventful week here in Israel. And I remember we were in contact, was it Sunday after that terrible Hezbollah rocket attack on Majdal Shams on the Golan Heights and the 12 children who were murdered and the multiple injuries. And you were, I recall from our communication that day, you were down. Maybe share with the listeners how you were feeling on that Sunday.
Down. You're always so mild. Down. I was in a rage.
Rage?
I saw red because I felt that we have been pushing our red lines farther and farther away. I've been very disappointed. Look, I can't say specifically about the war in Gaza. I know we've done a lot, et cetera, et cetera. However, I have been feeling that, you know, what we did in Yemen after one person in Tel Aviv was killed by the drone, and we went into Yemen and we wreaked havoc. Again, not full-scale war, but we sent a strong message. And in the north, we had a couple with 3 children killed, a perfectly, happy couple going about their business, and they were killed by a Hezbollah rocket. We've had so many attacks on property and on people and wounded people. And why the people of the north, A, many of whom are evacuated, and B, many of whom aren't, why their lives are worth less than the lives of people in Tel Aviv. And I was sick of it. And I said, this is not deterrence. All we're doing is sitting ducks for Hezbollah, and we have got to do something. I was really, really angry and disappointed. I admit it, disappointed in the government and in the army, etc.
Well, the argument, of course, is that when we had that terrible incident with the 12 children murdered, that you can think with your head or you can act with your stomach, right? And, they hit you, they killed 12 innocent people, children, a terrible atrocity, but you've still got to calculate your moves. I always believe you've got to take a deep breath and you've got to say, what is now good for Israel? What is good for my strategy? Because revenge for the sake of revenge might give momentary, momentary feeling.
Satisfaction or something.
Yeah, but
catharsis.
But we have to be smart. And in the end, the result that Israel took out the head of Hamas's military, in the Israeli media, they're portraying him as the chief of staff of the Hamas, of Hezbollah, sorry. Hezbollah. I thought that was a very, very clever, very responsible, and very appropriate counterstrike. Because first of all, we hid in Beirut, which means if you're hiding in any part of Lebanon, we'll find you even in the Lebanese capital. Secondly, we hit the guy directly responsible for the attacks on Israel because he's in charge of their military machine. And thirdly, we did a good, clean strike with very limited collateral damage. And from my point of view, that was a very, very smart and sensible Israeli counterstrike. We hit Hezbollah where it hurt them.
Okay, so here's where you and I are very different, both in temperament and in, I would say, thinking. Although in this case, I have to say you were right. I admit it. But here's the thing.
I was right about not responding from the hip when one's angry.
Yes, but also I was impatient. So when we struck in Lebanon, we struck in Beirut, struck the I don't know what you'd call him. He was the chief of staff of the military of Hezbollah. I thought, okay, that's good. That's very good. However, as soon as that was over, there was a lot of talk online and among officials in Washington and in Israel saying, okay, we retaliated for the 12 kids. That's enough. And that made me nervous. Okay, I was wrong because a few hours later, we killed Ismail Haniyeh in Iran.
You
so
say we, but official Israel has not
haven't.
claimed responsibility.
We haven't. And in fact, there some people are saying, how do we know it was Israel? Maybe it was Luxembourg that did that. We don't know. Okay, so you're right. Since I have no official position and I'm taking responsibility, I certainly didn't do it personally. I was just very happy it happened. But I will say one thing. It is true, I admit, and I even said it to you, I didn't understand why we weren't going into Beirut much more forcefully, because why? And again, you said revenge. I'm not for revenge. No, I'm for preempting. I'm for telling the enemy, you cannot do this to us anymore. Forget revenge. Let's preempt. Let's have the ball in our court, not their court. Why are we always letting them? Why is every news story about, well, they're retaliating for, and we're retaliating? No. They launched a war against us. We did nothing. And that's it. Forget the retaliation. We have to eliminate them. Now, I must say that I was wrong to be so impatient, because we did something even better a few hours later by going directly into Tehran on the day of the inauguration of the new evil president. And we sent a fantastic message, not only to Hamas, but to the Iranian regime and all that. And I just want to add one more thing. And of course, now Israelis are always saying, we all better get our bomb shelters ready, et cetera, throughout the country. Yes, you should. And too bad, we need to do it. Otherwise, we're just going to go through this all the time, again and again.
The news of the attack on the Hezbollah commander in Beirut broke at about 8 o'clock last night, Israel time. And this morning, Israel time, just at 6 a.m., I was up early, as I always am. It's part of, being over 60. You have trouble sleeping. And I heard on the radio the news that it just broke, that Haniyeh had been assassinated in Tehran. Can I say there are similarities? Once again, Israel hasn't officially
we haven't
taken responsibility for killing Haniyeh. But let's assume for the sake of argument that it was Israel. Both are very interesting because we said to both, I don't want to call them gentlemen, both terrorist leaders, that
both monsters with blood on their hands.
Wherever you are, we will find you.
Yes.
And you can be in the Lebanese capital using all of those Beirut civilians as a human shield, but we will get you and we will hit you and we will hold you accountable for what you've done. And the same with Haniyeh. He's in Tehran. He must think he's on very safe territory. He's being hosted by the Iranian government, I believe, in some sort of guest house that they've given to Hamas. And nevertheless, and both were, as I say, examples of good, clean hits where we got the bad guys with very, very limited, if any, collateral damage, which means good, clean Israeli strikes, always better. I would remind you also, Ruthie, that when this war started, the war against Hamas at the beginning, it's now close to 300 days ago, the Israeli leadership said, and it was criticized for it, saying, we will find all those responsible and we will mete out justice. And here, because the Olympic Games are going on as we speak in Paris, France, there's a historic comparison with the Olympics of 1972, because at those Olympics, Palestinian terrorists murdered 11 Israeli athletes brutally. I mean, most of them were murdered when their hands were bound and so forth. It was terrible. They were butchered. Though I suppose there's nothing new with Palestinian terrorism, unfortunately. No. But then Golda Meir met with the heads of the Mossad, and she said, you take out everyone involved in murdering those Israeli athletes. And over the years, it took time, but over the years, we did mete out justice. And when Israel said after October 7th, we will do the same with the Hamas leadership, I mean, we've been hitting them hard, and taking out Haniyeh, if it in fact was Israel, I think is supreme justice.
Now, of course, it would have been even better news had we taken out Sinwar. Okay, And by the way, Nasrallah as well. I mean, it would be really nice to have a twofer here with Sinwar and Nasrallah, which brings us to the question of the hostages and whether this helps or hurts a deal, which, of course, I've been, as you know, I say I don't see that there is any real deal on the table, despite what people are talking about. But in any case, this to me seems like it would be something that helps it along, despite what some people are saying. You see, now you've halted it, or whatever they're saying.
You said very correctly earlier that you criticized yourself. You say, I have to be more patient sometimes. I can't expect an immediate response. Also, an immediate response is what they're waiting for, and they're most prepared for it, and it's better to surprise them if you can. But I would say the same to you about Sinwar. I'd also like to see Sinwar dead. But we have to be patient. We have to find the right time. I am 100% convinced that in the end, we will get him. And the commander directly responsible for October 7th, who is Sinwar, he will find justice.
If we find him, and I think at this point, I think we probably do know where he is, or at least approximately, and that we are being extremely careful, and rightly so, about the hostages who may be or likely are around him in close proximity, because he surrounds himself always by human shields, and in this case, we know that would be his greatest insurance policy. The thing about him, and why did I say that I don't think there is any deal, is because before we even get into the, what do you call it, the clauses of some document, he won't even tell Israel how many hostages are alive and who they are. Forget the rest of it. He won't even give us the information. And that right there tells you what he will do, what he has been doing, is sending the message that, okay, Israel has to end the war. The IDF has to exit Gaza. We'll have a ceasefire. In other words, as we always say, we cease, they fire. So again, if we can't even find out how many hostages are alive, how many are dead, and who they are, that's a bad sign right there.
The whole issue of a ceasefire also needs to be discussed, because when you say ceasefire, a lot of, not just anti-Israel types, but a lot of good people can say, ceasefire, that's good, 30,000, 40,000 people have been killed according to the Hamas numbers, yes, which include, of course, a lot of terrorists, and they're probably exaggerated anyway, those numbers. But let's stop the bloodshed. Who can be against stopping the bloodshed? And here we have to remind people that if you say ceasefire that leaves Hamas in power, even in power over a small part of the Gaza Strip, a ceasefire that allows them to rebuild, re-energize, and re-establish their control and ultimately spread their control back to the whole of the Gaza Strip, which is what Hamas wants, of course.
Of course.
That sort of ceasefire is not a solution. That sort of ceasefire.
Suicide for Israel and suicide for any Palestinians in Gaza
who want something else.
Who are not Hamas.
Correct.
However many those are. You and I have maybe a different opinion about that.
We could
but
talk.
That's irrelevant at the moment. Yes, it would be suicide for any normal person who wants a normal life and not to be under threat of annihilation every minute.
It's almost a cliche, but Hamas, as you remember clearly, said in the first week of the war, we would do October 7th again and again and again, given the opportunity, and leaving them in power. So at the beginning they might be weak, but they will rearm and be there and be just as formidable. And that's why it's crucial that when this is over, as the Prime Minister said in his speech to Congress last week, that Hamas no longer rules the Gaza Strip. And when Israel says we want the Palestinians in Gaza to rule themselves, but is it too much to ask that they accept our right to live in peace and not to be the target of their attacks? That's not too much. That's a very minimalist demand. And I think Israel is right in making that demand. And all those people overseas who think ceasefire. Like this week, I think the governments of Canada, Australia, and New Zealand all called for a ceasefire, right? They said, it'd be nice to get the hostages out, but they don't make it conditional. They say unilateral ceasefire. And once again, you understand why people in the West think, that's a good thing. But no.
Yeah, you know how people in the West live? You know, they don't understand a thing. Do you know how many times people from the West visit Israel and are taken on a tour of this minuscule country, and they go to a border and you say, see that little hill there? See that right there where you don't even need binoculars to see the people walking on it? That's Syria. See that? That's Lebanon. See over there? That's Jordan. See, when you go to the Gaza envelope, the communities surrounding the Gaza Strip, anybody who went down there after October 7th to witness or to see, you know, the aftermath of the atrocities was stunned. Even Israelis, by the way, who know that about this country. We know that it's so tiny. We know that it takes, 4 hours from tip to tip or whatever to drive. But even Israelis say, you're standing here, here's a house, there's blood all over. And then you look here, and the fence, the border fence to Gaza is right there. A 6-year-old could throw a soccer ball over it. It is shocking. And that's why it is very enraging when these people from countries where, they have crime to contend with and maybe
global warming.
Exactly. Global warming, abortion.
All important issues. But for Israelis...
All important issues. I would dispute the global warming one, but that's for another podcast.
Ruthie, you're exposing yourself as a anti-science climate denier.
No, on the contrary.
Yes?
Oh, on the contrary.
But we don't want to go into that conversation.
We're not going to get into that. On the contrary. What I'm saying, though, is it takes a lot of nerve for people who don't know what it's like to sit in their house or they're drinking their coffee and reading the newspaper and have an air raid siren.
Yeah.
Would
I'll
you
tell you a
agree with
story
that?
about people visiting Israel. There's a famous line that I heard from George W. Bush. He came here the first time as governor of Texas.
Uh-huh.
And when he was a potential Republican candidate for president, it must have been in the late 1990s. And he was shown around Israel by the then foreign minister, Ariel Sharon. And Sharon took him up in a helicopter and he showed him the border with Lebanon, the border with Syria, and the border with Jordan. And he took him to the south and he did this whole tour of Israel. And Bush afterwards spoke about Ariel Sharon, he became president, Sharon became prime minister, who gave him this tour of Israel. And he said, Sharon showed me, quoting the future president, he said, Sharon showed me that Israel at its most narrow point in the center of the country is but 9 miles wide. And then he said, we have driveways in Texas that are longer than that. And
that's true.
Yeah. And so for people around the world who say all sorts of things, and maybe they have good intentions and maybe they're just playing politics, who knows? But they have to understand the realities here. And that's one reality they have to understand is the following. Israel will not agree, under any circumstances, that when this is over, Hamas will continue to rule the Gaza Strip, because that is only a recipe for more problems down the line.
It will have meant that all our brave soldiers and all the people who risked their lives, not only soldiers, who risked their lives on October 7th to save others, and some of whom lost their lives in the process of doing that. Mm-hmm. It will mean that all that was in vain if Hamas stays in power. And not only was it in vain, but as you said, it endangers everybody else. And I'm going to remind people, I've said this before, and it's worth repeating. One of the hostages' fathers has said, yes, my son is a hostage in Gaza, but I have 3 other children here. And if we make a bad deal and we do anything like that, all my other children are likely to end up hostages or dead or what. So we can't agree to any of that. But let me ask you a question I wanted to, before I forget, because it was something it's been on my mind. I read this morning that Israeli embassies around the world are being notified to take precautions. And now you were ambassador, you were ambassador to the UK, and I'm curious, what if you were right now ambassador in the UK, what would be going on right now? What would be the procedure under such circumstances?
So first of all, Israeli embassies around the world under normal circumstances have high levels of security, under normal circumstances. But when something like this happens, like you've taken out a senior Hamas person or a senior Hezbollah person, then you have to heighten your security. And in every Israeli embassy abroad, there's always one official who's in charge of the safety of the diplomats and the security of the building. And you can maybe change your routine. And they ask you if you were planning to do a public event. They said, can you reschedule it? Because obviously, embassies have historically been the targets of terrorist attacks. Most famously, right, the attack against Hezbollah blew up the Israeli embassy in Argentina in the last decade of the previous century. Yes, and it was a very bloody event. I have a friend who lost his wife in that attack.
Yes,
very, very. And of course, if the Iranians thought that they could hit an Israeli embassy and kill diplomats, they would do it. And one of the reasons we haven't seen attacks on embassies recently is not because they aren't motivated to do it. It's because we've actually spent a lot of time investing in embassy protection. Because that
you mean they might have been trying, and we don't know. There may have been thwarted attempts that we actually.
Well, there were attempts in India and places like that we know about, and attacks on.
But what about in the UK and in the United States?
So it depends on the country. In the UK, obviously, the Israeli security services work very closely with the British ones. There was very close coordination, and I went everywhere and protected by Her Majesty's finest, and they were a very fine bunch of men and women who I had great professional respect for, and they were doing their job. And just as they protect the royal family and they protect the British Prime Minister, they also protect one or two ambassadors, and I was one of them. And it was appreciated. I never felt scared in Britain. I never felt, because I felt that the people who aren't as well protected as me, maybe they have to worry. I didn't have to worry. I was the Israeli ambassador.
Although you have been watching since then, in the last just few years since you returned, that not only those kind of threats, but anti-Semitism has also exploded, and not only by Palestinian terrorist types. It's exploded on the left as well. Fellow travelers with the Palestinian movement. Now, I'm wondering if you think that what's going to be happening in the next day or so is that we're going to be hearing, again, in America now it's 7 hours behind. So everybody's sort of waking up, or not quite yet. If you think that we're going to be told, as we were as soon as the assassination of the Hezbollah chief of staff took place, we're going to be told, okay, that's enough, no more escalation. This is going to be escalation. Do you think that's what the world is going to be saying to us right this morning when everyone wakes up?
So every time you do one of these assassinations, and it doesn't matter if it's in Beirut or in Gaza or in Tehran, if there is collateral damage, and sometimes, unfortunately, there is, then usually the level of criticism is higher. But in the current two cases, one which is relevant in Beirut, we've publicly said it's us, and in Tehran, we have not said it's us, but many people presume that it's us. We're talking, as far as I've seen, clean strikes, where, once again, collateral damage is very, very limited. And therefore, the sort of automatic, Israel is overreacting. No. And in fact, if we look at the strike in Beirut, it's very clever, because there was all this stuff that, I don't know if it's true or not, but some people said to the Israelis, or the Americans said to the Israelis, you don't attack Beirut, that will be a game changer. No, we attacked the person directly responsible for the murder of children in the Golan Heights. Surgical, very little collateral damage. It's a good, clean hit. How can you criticize us? This is taking out...
That's a joke.
No, obviously some people will.
You're saying, how can you? But you see, there's where, again, here we do differ, because I think two things. One is, I'm sick and tired of us constantly having to be clean and moral when we're fighting immoral, dirty foes. Okay? So it would be like, if you were in a boxing ring, right, and you're fighting according to all the rules, the boxing rules, and your opponent is not. He's biting you. He's cutting you with a switchblade. I don't know. We're not fighting on an even playing field. But also, don't you want the Lebanese people to be furious at Hezbollah for what it's doing to them? And so, for example, what if we flattened the airport and not a lot of people. People would have been evacuated. They'd be hiding out like we are, and then they'll get furious. Now we can't fly, and and to finally, for once and for all, overthrow Hezbollah. Stop voting for them. I mean, why not?
First of all, stop for a moment. I want to argue with what you've said. The first thing is you said hiding like we are. I've been in Tel Aviv recently. You live in Tel Aviv. The coffee shops are full. The restaurants are full. Obviously, Israelis, if the sirens go off, go to their bomb shelters. But the idea that the Israeli public is, I'm not talking about the people in the very north.
But I am.
No, but
people.
I'm saying Israelis are resilient. Israelis are resilient.
Yes.
Israelis are living their lives, and we're not, as a country. Obviously, people right on the border in the north are having you're right there, and they've been evacuated and so forth. And we lost another person, a kibbutznik, just the day after.
Yes.
Right, the day after the terrible.
Exactly.
All right. But on the whole, this country is strong and resilient, and people are going about their lives, worrying about loved ones in the army and so forth. But people are going about their lives. But I want to say something when you raise this issue about you're tired of people talking about morals and things when you are fighting an immoral enemy. I'd ask you, the Hamas terrorists raped women. Raped Israeli women. Does that mean Israeli soldiers should rape Palestinian women? The Hamas terrorists threw babies into the fire, burning them alive. Does that mean we should do the same? The Hamas terrorists decapitated, they beheaded civilians brutally. I've seen the videos. I don't wish anyone has to see the videos yet. Does that mean we should do the same? Obviously not.
No, and I don't think we should.
So what are you saying?
I'm saying I think we should tell the innocent, to the extent that there are innocent people in Gaza, but let's say in Lebanon you tell people to you tell them to evacuate, and you blitz their infrastructure. Yeah, what I'm saying is, we know maybe you people in Beirut who are sitting having your coffee and enjoying yourself, because they are also resilient. We know the Lebanese people have been through a lot.
Yes.
And they also, in a street next to where there was a bombing, are having coffee and reading their newspapers. What I'm saying is our northern border has completely ruined. Our economy in the north is ruined. The kids can't go to school. I'm saying that if that doesn't, what we have to say to the people of Beirut is, okay, now, here's what you get for not curbing Hezbollah yourself. That's it. No planes are going to leave your, no airport, I don't know, no electricity, whatever it is. I didn't say you behead them and you do all kinds of, we don't commit atrocities. What we do, though, is we have to say, no, you may not. This is your country, and you may not aggress against Israel, because the wrath of God will be on your head.
When I was working for the government, I once said wrath and got into trouble. I remember that incident very, very clearly.
Did?
Yes. But I'd like to say the following to you. All right, you can say, okay, we could have sent a message and hit an infrastructure target like Beirut Airport with very little human death, because people could have been told to leave beforehand. But then you have to ask a question: what are the consequences of that sort of attack? And does that give Hezbollah the excuse to attack Tel Aviv, or attack Haifa, or attack Jerusalem? And then we have to hit back harder. In other words, the Prime Minister, the Defense Minister, the senior decision makers of this country always have to think like in a game of chess. A good game of chess. You have to think, what is going to happen 2-3 moves ahead? And I think it's incumbent upon us to do that. And that's why I liked taking out the senior Hezbollah figure in Beirut, because surgical, thought about, and I don't think Hezbollah has any legitimacy with its own Lebanese public, even within its own Shia community, to launch some sort of a massive attack on Israel.
No, but by the way, Hezbollah gets its legitimacy to launch attacks from Iran. And Iran uses Hezbollah as its army to protect its nuclear program, basically, okay? Hamas for Iran is, they're nice thugs and they can help them. But Hezbollah, Iran doesn't want to lose Hezbollah fighters. So here's the thing, though. Okay, that's Hezbollah. We now know are capable, we've known this before, of going into Tehran. Now, Iran has said, we're going to strike back hard, et cetera, et cetera. We know they say that a lot, but I have feel that the stronger we are, the less likely they are to hit us hard. When we're weak is when they blitz us. You see it again and again, and that's what happened on October 7th, and that's what happened last week, and has been happening for days. I don't think people outside of Israel realize how many rockets, missiles, and drones are fired all day long, every day, from Lebanon.
So we're going back to the beginning of our conversation, and you agreed with me that sometimes we have to be patient.
Yes.
We will find a solution where Hezbollah is no longer on the border, where they're pushed back, and that people who lived in northern Israel who've become internal refugees, displaced, they can go back to their homes because they won't have to see Hezbollah on the border, and they won't have to live in fear of an October 7th type attack happening in the north. That is the goal. That is doable. I believe that can happen. We might have to put more military pressure on them before that will happen. Most of the Lebanese people want that. Most of the international community wants that. And of course, Israel wants that. It's doable. We will see how it will happen, but we do need patience. We don't need to shoot from the hip out of anger. We have to calibrate our steps. That's the way we'll win this war.
Okay, well, amen to that, I would say. And I have to say, though I did say that I owe you, I suppose you call it an apology for being too hot-headed, not apologize. But I mean to say, okay, I was wrong about thinking we're not doing enough, et cetera, et cetera. But I can't promise that this is how I'm going to end. I can't promise that by the end of this week, if things aren't moving the way I think they should, I might again get in a bad mood. We'll see. And then we'll be here to talk about it next week.
You will communicate that to me, and I will once again urge you to calm down and grit your teeth and be patient, and we will win this.
Great. And so I would just like to say, before signing off, please like and subscribe. And we really would like you to send your comments. And maybe we'll also refer to, if you have topics you'd like us to cover, we'd be happy to do that.
And I look forward to being with you again this time next week, Ruthie.
Okay. Bye, Mark.